Chapter, a podcast designed to connect authors and audiences. And today I have a great podcast interview for you today with Joanne Richards. Joanne has more stories than we have time. And we're going to try to cover as much as we can today in today's episode. She is the author of Midlife Magic. Joanne has had 7 marriages. Joanne has information to share with us on aliens, UFOs, faeries, paranormal, magic, the Mormon Church. So much. I have many questions. Do you have questions? Stick around. This is the podcast for you. Joanne Richards on Living the Next Chapter. It's coming up right now. Thanks, guys. Hello, everybody. This is Dave from Living the Next Chapter. I have probably the most interesting author I've had on in quite a while.
Well, thank you.
So many different things for us to chat about. We were just joking before we hit record that, wow, we could probably turn this into a 2-week podcast. So if you're looking at the hour stamp for this podcast and it says more than 40 hours, this is going to be a long podcast for you, but there's so much to talk about. So today I have with me author of Midlife Magic, Joanne Richards on Living the Next Chapter. Hello, Joanne. How are you?
Hello. Thank you. I'm great. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I am wonderful. And I've been anxiously curious about today's podcast. That's how I'm defining it. Anxiously curious.
Anxious, like that.
Because I'm not sure where we're going to go, but at the same time, extremely curious about what we're going to be talking about today, because your book covers, as I'm reading the bio for the book and the
right.
write-up, there's a lot you have going on here. And
yes, it could be 2 books actually, but it's one.
Okay, so let's start with when did you write this book?
When?
Yeah.
Okay. Probably I started it many years ago when I was a Mormon and we were taught or encouraged to write our family history and our autobiography. So I have notes from way back when, and I used to keep journals regularly. And then when I was on the UFO speaking circuit at one of the conferences I was at in about, let's just say 2012, because I don't remember, several years ago, I met a woman and I'd been on a panel. So she heard me speak a little bit. We met. She goes to a lot of conferences. And usually when I'm at the UFO conferences, I'm speaking about my husband's experiences in the military with UFOs and all that. And after it was over and we're all leaving the room, she goes, well, hi, my name's so-and-so. And like, so when's your next story coming out? And I go, Mark usually writes. He's constantly writing. So no, I mean, when's your story? I go, me? I've got nothing to say. There's nothing interesting about my life. And she goes, no, you need to write your book. And so fast forward a few years, I'd see her every now and then. Well, how's your book coming along? I go, yeah, I haven't done anything about it. But I would sit and at a conference, if I had a downtime, and I'd make notes like, okay, well, here's an outline, or here's topics, or I'm going to just start free writing about the things I would want to put in it. And so that went on for a few years. And then a couple of years ago, before COVID locked us all down, I had the opportunity to there was a woman that showed up at my networking group, and she was a book writing coach and she was a published author herself. And I had done some bookkeeping work for her. And I said, I think maybe it's time for me to do some writing, get on that book that I keep talking about. Yeah. And so I took her class and I'm telling people what I'm going to write about. And they're going, and then I go, well, let me start at the beginning, and we'll start with the childhood, the marriages. And, they didn't, because I write about UFOs and paranormal and faeries and witchcraft. And they were going, yeah, I don't know what you're going to do with that. And then all of a sudden that was starting to be in the mainstream news. It's like, oh yeah, I guess that is a good thing for you to write about. So anyway, that got me started, and I really worked on writing out the chapters and sharing it with them, and they really liked it. And then COVID hit. So the group fizzled, just died down. And so then I finished up what I thought, and then I started working with a couple of editors. And I worked with 2, actually. I worked with one, and then I found the other one. and I knew who I wanted to be the illustrator for the cover.
Mhm.
And it just came about. So it came about in the last couple of years. And thankfully not thankfully COVID happened, but thankfully COVID gave me some extra time to work on it because I couldn't see my husband as much as I normally did. So I had some extra time, and it gave me a break from my bookkeeping. And it felt like it was the right time for me to do some inner work and really see how I was feeling about this and dig into my journals. It's like, oh yeah, that guy did that. Or, it's like, how was I feeling about that? And, a lot of it was painful. So a lot of it was basically self-therapy, or it was part of doing my inner healing work and whatever. So it was good for me to do it. And that's why it covers so many, what people might think are scattered topics, but because the bad marriages led into the current husband and how he introduced me to other topics and how I remembered that I was tied into other topics. And so it's just, for me, it just kind of all flowed.
Yeah.
And so that's why the book was born. And it's not a long book, but it's meaningful to me. And I have some nice cheerleaders, and, the people who have read it enjoyed it.
Great.
Yeah.
No. So, okay. So you mentioned earlier that with the Mormon Church, that you would be writing out your story. Can you explain, is that a thing? Like,
the Mormon Church is big on genealogy and family history.
Yeah.
And so part of that is like writing your autobiography, writing your life history, so that then you can pass that down to your descendants or whatever.
Okay.
So this was kind of part of that, but unfortunately, mine had a lot of bad news in it.
Yeah.
It wasn't always, and it was interesting because when I looked through my journals to get notes about different husbands, the whole thing, and we'll just start, I guess I'm going to just start with the marriages. It's like,
Sure.
I grew up in the 50s and 60s. So you're watching Leave It to Beaver and, all those fun, happily ever after movies and all that. And in the Mormon Church, and my family's not Mormon, but I joined when I was about 12 officially, but I started going when I was 10 because my best friend's family was Mormon. And so you learn about, happy family, and, families are forever. And that's great. I think, if you've got a strong love relationship, go for it. And hopefully your marriage works out. But I just thought, marriage is the way to go, even though my parents didn't have a great marriage. So I've seen the rocky side of it, but I saw a lot of happy marriages in the Mormon Church. I thought, well, that's what I want. I want the Leave It to Beaver and Donna Reed. I want those, the white picket fence, and I want the man to take care of me, and I want 1 million kids, and la, la, la. And none of that's happened. No man has ever taken care of me the way I thought they should, or, the way I hoped. And I don't have 1 million kids. I have one. And, the universe knew what they were doing when they only let me have one. So
your kid is one of 1 million, though. So there you go.
She is, but I only have one biological child.
There you go. That's great.
And originally I thought I should have lots.
Yeah.
And, in the book, it's like I said, I lost a boyfriend because he wasn't Mormon, but that, wouldn't have been the deal breaker for me. But he knew I wanted a lot of kids, and he only wanted 2. And so he, broke things off because he knew our goals were different. Well, he had his 2 kids. I had 1. It's like, if I had only known way back then, I wouldn't have gone through this. But I had the false impression that if I'm spiritual and I'm being a good Mormon, and if I marry somebody that's a Mormon who acts like they're spiritual and looks good at church and looks like, they're doing all the right things, then we should just absolutely have a happy marriage. Okay, that isn't the case, folks. Just because you look good at church does not mean your spiritual practices will fall into place once you get married. That doesn't mean, you're going to pray together regularly or do all these wholesome family activities. And it doesn't mean that your marriage is destined for success, because there's a lot of other things that have to go into, a long-standing relationship, as
for sure.
Many people would find out. And, you shouldn't get married just because you're horny. It's like,
Exactly.
The Mormon Church, there's no premarital sex unless you want to get in trouble. And if there's chemistry flowing, well, you better hurry up and get married. So that was part of the problem too. It's like you didn't take the time for a long-term courtship, and you didn't talk about all the really important things that now I know you need to talk about. And you didn't sit down, well, like, how are we going to handle the money? It's like, if we have kids, well, do we want kids? If we have kids, how will we just, what's our parenting style going to be like? All these things we should have talked about, we never did. So I had one bad marriage after another, and 2 of the 7 marriages are not Mormons. The one I had the kid with and my current husband. The 5 Mormons were, horrible husbands, and it wasn't all their fault, but, there was physical abuse. There was financial abuse. There was a lot of emotional, verbal abuse. So it's like, oh, sucks. But I kept hoping that Mr. Right would come along, and my daughter tells me, it's like, you just kept trusting in love.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And, when I met Mark, it's like, well, I'm thinking, okay, I'm in my 40s. I'm not going to have kids, and I'm not going to have any more kids. And marriage, I didn't even care if we got married or not. It just turns out that, he eventually wanted to get married. So it's like, why not?
Nice.
But I didn't have to, it's like, I wasn't thinking, oh, my life is ruined if I'm not married.
So when you look back at the marriages, is there something in you that regrets 7 marriage experiences, or celebrates, or how do you when people ask you about that, or that they hear the number and they respond, how do you feel when you talk about that part of your story?
Most of them, it's not like people, I don't get a lot of negative reactions. I get a lot of stunned reactions. And now I kind of joke about it, because my podcast mentor, like, who do you know who's been married almost as many times as Elizabeth Taylor? And so now I've got a great tagline. But and at my 20th high school reunion, I'd already been married like 5 times. And I won the prize. Even though I was a Mormon, I won a magnum of champagne. I won the prize for being married the most times by that reunion. It's like, I'm not even going to drink it. Yeah. But, so now I kind of, I've had a lot of angst, but I've learned a lot of things. So that's, I've learned a lot of good lessons. Did I go through painful stuff to learn those lessons? Sure. Would I advise people to keep getting married just to learn the lessons? No, try and learn the lessons before you keep getting married or keep getting in long-term relationships. Because even if you're not married, being in a long-term relationship can have its own issues, and it can be just as hard to get out of. So, it's good to learn the lessons. And if I can help people learn some lessons or understand what I learned before they get too far into it, and most of it was, I had to learn to stand up for myself.
Okay.
And I grew up watching my mom, not knowing the word, but watching her be codependent with my dad, because he was an alcoholic. And again, back then you just stayed with the person. And it's like, well, I learned that I don't have to just stay with the person just because you've got a kid, or because you're Mormon, or just because, what are people going to think of me? By that time, it's like, I didn't care. And it's like, well, this isn't working out. And he thinks it's my fault, and it's not always my fault. And if he doesn't want to work on it, and that's the other thing, if people don't want to both want to work on it together, then, sayonara.
Yeah. So that takes us to today.
Yes.
And your marriage.
Yep.
7 is a lucky number, isn't it?
I think in some cultures it is.
Some culture it is, right? So that would be where you're at right now.
There you go.
So let's go with that. Let's apply that little bit of that little knowledge to this. So tell me about your marriage.
Okay.
And the relationship you have. As you said, his name is Mark.
Yes, Mark.
Mark. Let's talk about Mark.
Okay. Mark grew up in a military family.
Okay.
And his dad was career military, and so was Mark. And he was an only child, so that says volumes to most people. He's very charming, and he's highly educated. He's really smart. You can have a really great conversation with him, and I like that. And we met I'd already been used to visiting a couple of friends in prison. So the prison side really didn't scare me. And we wrote for a couple of months before I ever met him in person. And my roommate at the time, whose husband was in prison, said, "Oh, I just, met one of my husband's friends. His mom was visiting today. He's really nice. He's really smart." I go, "Oh, smart would be a new kind of boyfriend for me." So that would be good. And so, like I said, we started writing, and just fabulous conversations, even in a letter. And for 25 years, we've had fabulous conversations. And after a couple of months, I met him in person. Then I would visit him visiting was 4 days a week. I visited, maybe once a weekend. And then it was like it eventually got to all 4 days when I lived near the prison. And he got moved around. So sometimes I could only visit him once a month. And after 5 years, we courted for 5 years, and then decided it was probably a good idea to get married. Not that I needed to get married, but politically for an inmate, it's a lot better if you have a wife as your advocate, or if you need one, to as your support system. A wife holds more clout than a girlfriend. You can't, the girlfriend, she's not going to get anywhere if she calls up the prison, but the wife might make some noise, and it might have a little clout. Anyway, so we got married, and we've been married. It'll be 20 years in September. No, that's my grandson's birthday. It'll be 20 years in July. I gauged them because I can remember how old my grandson is. And he was, born a couple months after we got married. So,
oh, great.
Yeah. So, so I've been visiting him for almost 25 years, and it's a very interesting lifestyle. And if you're young, I wouldn't advise it. No. Because if you're serious about the person, it's a whole lifestyle. And he's often where I can go visit him every week. And I only go 1 day a week instead of both days of the weekend, and I think visiting's back up to like 3 days a week. But, I'll go, and we can sit for a few hours and just talk about, he's got kids and grandkids. I could talk about my side of the family. We have a house in California that he grew up in that's old. We can talk about the house and, what tree fell over today, or, what plumbing repair needs to be made. We talk about normal stuff. Yeah. And he's a writer, and I've published 2 of his books, and he's written a ton that haven't been published yet, and he's very passionate about the military and what they've done. And he's got some fascinating stories about what he's done in the military. And so we've had these great conversations for almost 25 years. And I learned a lot about non-religious spirituality from him. And I learned about faeries, and I learned about the reality of UFOs and aliens and who's visiting the planet. And I began to remember that, I do have a gift of being able to be around spirits and ghosts and things like that. And so it opened my eyes up to a lot of wonderful things besides being a Mormon and a bookkeeper.
Okay, so now you just opened the door.
Yeah. You like how I segued there?
I'm going to have to sit up straight now, because I got questions. I'm just fixing my sweater here and getting comfortable, because here we go.
Dive in.
Okay. So you've opened the door about UFOs.
Right.
Now, I think as a casual observer with absolutely very little knowledge, I'm boldly going into my curiosity here.
Lovely.
Yes. So I'm very eager. Okay, here we go. So can you give me an actual example of a UFO experience that either you or Mark or somebody can speak to?
Yes.
That would be like, most people would be like, that's impossible. That never happened.
Right.
Never.
Well, I'll tell you that he has grown up around this stuff. He's seen this stuff since he was a toddler.
Okay.
I have not. I grew up watching Martian movies, and we're only a year apart. So we grew up in the same era. But a couple years ago, when it was my 65th birthday and I don't know which wedding anniversary it was, but we were having a wedding anniversary. And I arranged our wedding to be on the same day as my birthday. So he only had one date to remember. The timing happened to be so that after several years of being married, we're now allowed to, the governor allowed people with life sentences to have family visits. So overnight visits with, parents, spouses, children, whatever. So every couple months I go and we have a couple days together in an apartment. And so that particular, I don't know if it was a weekend or a weeknight, it doesn't matter, on my birthday. So that visit, and while we're there, it's like they have to be counted by the guards numerous times during the day and night. And so 9:30 at night was one of those times. And we're sitting there watching TV. He has to go out to the outer door and stand there and be counted. And then he's out on the patio because it's July and it's a lovely evening. He goes, come out here, come out here. And I said, okay, whatever. And he goes, look up. And there is a huge, huge, huge triangular shaped craft flying 1,000, 1,500 feet just above us, very slowly. And I had already seen a couple of UFO sightings myself since I'd known him, but they were far away, so I couldn't see the shape of the craft. This, it's triangular. Obviously, it's dark. There's red lights. I can hear the whoop, whoop, whoop of the engine or whatever it is. And it goes over us slowly. And then did a loop, and a couple minutes later it was back. So I got to see it twice. And I said, that's not one of ours, right? And he goes, no. And the prison he's at is in Vacaville, California. And just down the road is Travis Air Force Base. So I thought, well, maybe, the Air Force has triangular craft, but it was not a human craft because they can't fly that slow, that low. And he knew exactly who it was. He knew exactly who was flying it. And, they were his friends and they are not human. And I go, okay, well, that is the best birthday anniversary present ever, ever. And I loved it. It was like, and again, that was probably my fourth or fifth different UFO sighting, but it was like up close and really personal. And I could hear it and I could see it. And it's like, oh my gosh. It was like, the movie with, Richard Dreyfuss, when the ship is right there. Yeah. It's like, oh my gosh, it was beautiful. And it was, I know what I saw. I can't deny it. I know what I saw. And it wasn't just, somebody shot a projection of an image in the sky for me. So that's my best favorite example. And that was just a couple years ago.
So that'd be like, for somebody like myself who hasn't experienced something like that, it'd be like movie magic almost, in a sense. Like this is, it doesn't feel real, but it's there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you know what, every time I go anywhere, he got into the habit of saying, well, just remember to look up, because sometimes you think it's a satellite and it's really not, because the satellites move in a very distinctive way and UFOs don't. And I've been other places where the UFO, and even if it was a drone or, a really, manned flight, it's like, if it's going like horizontally and then vertically, okay, that's not a star.
Yeah.
Or if it's blinking at you, like it's throbbing and telling you hello, that's not a star. And if it's like stationary and all of a sudden it's visible and not visible and the light's just going on and off, and it's like, oh my goodness, it's not a star. There are species that have the ability to, their craft can they can cloak the craft, or or just reflects the light. Yeah. So they can make it so that it looks like this star that's dimming and not, but it disappears and then it comes back. And I've seen that too. So it's like, and I've seen that pretty close. So it's amazing. This stuff is real.
So when you do your speaking engagements for UFO conferences, what kind of topics do you bring to the audience? If I was sitting in the audience today and you're on the stage and you're speaking, what would I might hear from you?
I have about at least 15 different talks that I give. And there's a couple of space battles that my husband's been in, because for the military, he was a military space pilot, is one of his roles. So there's been a few battles, and he's still bound by his US military secrecy oaths. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't go into detail about stuff that was US based, but he's also worked for an international security agency that was top secret that his dad ran after Admiral Nimitz died. So there's a lot of things he's done that he can kind of talk about, and the government knows what he's talking about, and he keeps in check with them about what he can and cannot say. But there's some space battles that are fascinating that he's talked about, and there's been some interstellar, interspecies conferences on this planet that he was at. One is a 7-year-old and one is a 18, 19-year-old, and just learning about all the different species that were at that and the treaty negotiations that were going on. I talk about a base in New Mexico that's notorious for alien experiments that were going on there, and just really horrible stuff was going on there with humans. And Mark was part of a military rescue mission back in 1979. And so that's one of the things I talk about. And I talk about, one of my favorite talks is just talking about different species and what they're like and what their culture is like and if they're friend or foe. But nowadays I tend to not want to even talk about the ones that aren't our friends, because we have so many that are friendly. But there's plenty that are not friendly. And there's so many. And well, I don't know. There was one talk I gave about a species that was on an island in Scotland for the holidays, the winter holidays, Yule, and all the different species they invited there. And Mark was only there briefly, but one of his female partners was there with their toddler. And it was just so interesting to hear a lot of it from her perspective, because she wrote a lot of stuff in her diaries that their daughter is now sharing with Mark. And so her perspective to be around all these aliens. So it's like, I'm getting it from her and, Mark. So it's not just his one. It's not just, well, you're just repeating his words. So I have a lot of information about different stuff, and it's mostly the military based stuff. So there was a time when, let's see, I think he was still in high school. So it might've been between his junior and senior year. I can't remember, but, there was a species that wanted to establish a military training program and include humans so that we could start doing more work together between humans and aliens, working together peacefully, in a military effort. So they would use a castle in England that's on the East Coast up towards the north and train. And if you've ever watched Jurassic World.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And, the scene where the cute guy in his leather bomber jacket, he's riding the three-wheeler through the forest with the raptors. Okay, well, my husband used to train like that, only on his motorcycle, and the raptors would run beside him in formation. So they would practice that. And I have his bomber jacket. And I go, you look just, that actor looks a lot like you, dude. So I have this, that experience that he went through as a young man, and there were other well-known people that were in that. And then the war games they had to do as part of their training out in space. And so lots of fascinating information, and it's all from basically a military standpoint. And it's just now that I can, give more talks on, my own experiences and things like that. But most of the time when I was at conference, it was just based on his experiences, because most people are not sharing what the military has been involved with.
Yeah.
So, and I like doing that.
It's like how you see Hollywood's version of all these things.
Right.
And obviously Hollywood, they always sprinkle in a little bit of maybe some truth, but a lot of maybe wishing or Hollywood magic, right?
And
I think of Men in Black, stuff like that, right? With
I love that movie.
Yes.
And on one note, the military has for years shared information with Hollywood, and that's how they've gotten a lot of their ideas. And Gene Roddenberry for Star Trek, they were, Mark remembers him, and anyway, they worked together. And then Men in Black, I used to tease him, Mark. It's like, okay, well, do we really have places like that? I think that is so cool, that UN kind of building where all these species are walking around. He goes, yeah, it's there in England. It's not used for that anymore, but it was like that building in England that you've probably seen. It's like, oh my gosh. And you know how in, I guess it's Star Wars, how there's the bar, the cantina out in
Yes.
space. It's
Yeah.
like, I love that scene. And then when he was doing the report about, there are places like that. So there, you know, space stations with like that for rest stops. And the report that he did about his training with the Raptors in England stuff, when they went out to space, you know, they ended up at a place like that to kind of rest after their war games. And, you know, there's a whole bar thing there. And it's like, oh my gosh. So truth is stranger than fiction, or fiction, I don't know, however the saying goes. Yeah, it's just amazing. It's just amazing how the reality is just like, it sounds strange, but it's like, you know, it's not. Not to me anymore. But.
Yeah. So remember, I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast that this would be an interesting one, and I think we're going there. So, okay, so we've touched on a few things so far. What else is in the book, Joanne, that readers would be interested when they found out that in chapter 4 we talk about this, or what kind of other things in the book would pique someone's interest to go and purchase your book?
Well, each husband gets a chapter.
Oh, okay.
Okay. You know, it's like each husband gets a chapter, and I've named them comically based on the idiot that they were. And then I have like 3 chapters on Mark. It was like how we met, what is it like to be married to an inmate, and the logistics, you know, what's it like to visit somebody in prison, and how does getting married there work? And just because people might, because it's like, it's interesting because again, my family, you know, when they first found out I was dating an inmate, it's like, because I grew up in, it's like, well, if they're in prison, they must be guilty. Well, okay, a very small percentage of people that go to prison are really not guilty. And anyway, my husband, you know, this is almost beside the point, but he was framed for something he didn't do. But again, people just assume that everybody there is guilty. But, you know, when you're sitting in the visiting room, and yes, you know, he's pointed out to me, okay, well, that guy's the head of that gang, and that guy's the head of that gang, and that guy runs that drug trade, and that guy visiting with his mom today has killed 7 people, or, you know, whatever. Some, you know, some of these people have very violent pasts. But when I go to visiting, I'm usually just seeing the loving relationship between the husband and wife, or the parents and their son, and the dad and their kids.
Yeah.
Because that's the purpose of why usually we're there to visit. Most of the visitors are not there to slip their husband a few drugs or some money or whatever. Most of the big drugs and the cell phones and all the contraband come in through the staff. So, but again, it's the reality of what it's like being, you know, having him there so long, and what it's like going to visit, and, you know, what am I having to do to just keep things normal and going on the outside world. And how he got me interested and introduced to this whole UFO stuff. And, you know, there's a chapter on my personal paranormal experiences. There's a chapter on my personal UFO experiences, and the elemental fairy realm, and then my magical practices, and also my gifts for intuition, and how I've also helped use that to protect me in certain instances. And then kind of like, you know, I know I'm on a new path, but I don't know exactly where it's going to lead me. I'm not going to be a bookkeeper forever. And I know I have, you know, wonderful magical things to do. I just don't know what they are yet, but I'm still open for possibilities. I'm getting close to 70, but I know there's still fun stuff and, you know, cool things for me to do besides just bookkeeping. So it's that. It's a combination of, you know, it's memoir, but it's a combination of helping people realize you can change your life at no matter how old you are, and you can change it so that it's your best happy life. And, you know, if I can do it, anybody can do it. And, you know, here's a few things I learned along the way. And, you know, maybe, you know, maybe you're not interested in UFOs, and that's fine. It's okay. It was more like, you know, I allowed myself the possibility to, you know, embrace those kind of things, but it could be anything.
So let's, if we don't mind, can we just touch on intuition a little bit?
Sure.
So is is intuition include or help describe like the process of reading a person? When you first meet somebody, you can kind of, you're like, I got this person. I think this, and this of this person. Is that part of it, or is that something completely different?
For me, it's a gut feeling.
Okay.
It's maybe knowing what the other person's about to say.
Yeah.
Sometimes it drives my husband crazy. It's like, I already know that. And, I know such and such is probably going to happen. And I already know that. I don't know the timing necessarily, but I already know something, or he doesn't want to tell me something, but I already know. So it's like, okay, well, I already know, and maybe you'll tell me and maybe you won't. A lot of times it's mostly for me, because it's not like I want to go around. I'm not playing psychic, like, okay, Dave, I know what you're thinking and blah, blah. It's never like that. But sometimes, especially I love it. Two reasons. I mean, two different things that's really been helpful lately. Since I moved to Portland, I'm in a wonderful neighborhood where I can walk a lot. And the nature here is beautiful no matter what the season. So I will often take my walk and start getting inspiration, which is like, oh, I'm getting these thoughts. So this is so cool. And it wasn't like I asked for that, or maybe I did, but I'm not walking with the head. I'm not walking looking at my phone. I'm not walking talking to anybody. I'm not walking listening to a podcast. I'm just walking and enjoying nature and staying connected with whatever. And sometimes just things come to me that I need to know, whether it was to help me with finishing my book, or whether I gave a talk to a wisdom conference in this past September. And it's like, it was in a couple of walks where I go, well, this is not a UFO conference. And I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to tell these people, because, these people are psychics and energy healers. And I've never been one of the speakers at a conference like that, but the ideas just flowed into my head. So to me, that's intuition. And for example, when I was writing the book, it's like I'm just walking around my house one day and it's like, oh, this is what the title should be. There was no question in my mind. And another day it's like, oh, this is what the cover should look like. And even though it wasn't the cover that my editor envisioned or even my illustrator envisioned, I said, this is what I have in mind. And she did it exactly what I wanted, and then added a few fairies. And it was perfect. It was just, it's like, and then other times it's helped for my protection, because I've been somewhere. And like, for example, I was in England on one trip, and I'd done my speaking thing, and my friend took me to Glastonbury, which is a very magical place anyway. And the Glastonbury tour is there. And it's cool for historical reasons, but if you can manage the walk up the hill, which was horrible, but I would do it again. And she goes, stand here. And I'm going, okay. And there's a vortex there. And there's the energy, if you're in tune to energy. I just stood there, and it's like, oh my gosh, it was like the scene where Marilyn Monroe standing over that grate, and the air just blows up her skirt.
Yep.
And it's like, it just felt like that. It was just like this powerful energy just coming up out of the ground. It's like, oh my God, I don't want to leave. This is the most magical feeling ever. But then I stood there for a while. There's all these kids, school kids and tourists, and thankfully nobody's paying attention to me. And I just wanted to just like, oh my gosh, this is heaven. Then I turn around, I'm getting this, ooh, and I turn around, and there's this very nice looking, guy, probably my age-ish, black slacks, black turtleneck pullover, a big touristy camera. I'm going, oh no, that I can't. It's like, I don't think he was going to harm me, but it's like, I knew he was there for some reason to check on me. I got to go. It's like, and I'm telling the two friends, I was like, you can stay up here, but I got to go. And I just proceeded to walk down the hill, and he didn't follow us or anything. So that was pretty cool. I've been so I felt very protected. I don't stick around to see what's going to happen. I just know I need to leave. Yeah. And I've been other places researching. I was at an Air Force base that is now like an air museum. It has an air museum. I don't think it's not an active air base anymore. And they've got a lot of cool planes and everything. And I was filming the different planes, because some of them either were the type that Mark used to fly, or his dad, or he'd actually been on some of those planes. So I'm filming them, and that's cool. And I'm getting ready to set up my camera. and start filming something new. And this guy is just like right there. It's like wanting to be chatty. And it's like, okay. And oh, I'm just a tourist. I'm like from Germany or wherever, somewhere in Europe. I think it was German. I'm just here visiting my brother, blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, okay, no, you're not. And I just had to remove myself. And it was like, okay, I just get these little feelings like, okay, this guy isn't who they say they are, guy or girl, whatever. It's usually a guy in my case. It's just, and I just need to remove myself or, not keep talking to them. And another time, I think it was my first trip to England, I did a lot of running around visiting sites because Mark's family lived there for a while. So I was visiting a now decommissioned airfield where he used to fly in and out of, and they were in the process of developing a museum there. And you had to get an appointment. So here I am in California, emailing this guy, trying to find the curator of the museum, and you have to get permission and an appointment to even go in there, because it's now part of an industrial park. And I said, well, my husband used to fly, blah, blah, blah. Gave him the whole story. He says, well, come, we had a date. It was pouring down rain. I got there and I did the tour of the museum, watched this cool film. I go into this next room where there's a lot of archive books and photo albums. And there's this guy sitting there. Oh, I used to be stationed here. I'm just on vacation. I'm going, well, how did you show up here without an appointment? I had to have an appointment. And I just kept getting this uneasy feeling. And I'm thinking, no, yet again, here's somebody checking up on me. And so right about then, the curator goes, okay, are you ready to go out on the flight line and see where your husband probably, landed? And, maybe the hangars where he might have used. Yeah, let's go. And even though it was about ready to flood, we went out there. It's like, because I just get these feelings. I know I have to leave the situation, and that's all intuition. And I've probably had it for a long time, but it certainly has become a lot stronger since I met Mark. And so
intuition then would also, I guess, the active being more in the moment would be part of that. Being aware of your surroundings, being part of the moment, whether a lot of people today would just naturally just go through life and it's lunch now and I don't even remember what happened in the last 3 hours.
Right.
Because I've been so busy doing emails and on my phone and not really putting the phone down and doing the walk with no distractions and just being aware of your surroundings.
I think so. And also if you get a thought, it's, some people call it inspiration, heavenly inspiration, or whatever, however you want to call it. Yeah. If you get a thought that, you should do this, or this is important, or go write this down. It's like, it could be as simple as something, write this down. You'll need to, it's like, just don't discount it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, exactly.
So somebody's giving you some divine guidance, and don't discount it.
Because I've woken up from a deep sleep, sat up and went, I have a completely formed new idea. I know all of the steps to do it. I know what it's going to be called, what it's due, everything. And to be quite honest, sometimes I get annoyed because there's everything is done. And I'm like, I just have to execute. And I'm like, where's the joy in that? Right? Like I want to have fun learning this, but no, here are the 5 steps. And it needs to be done by Monday. And I'm like,
oh, wow. But do you follow up on it?
I do. Oh, yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I'm like, I don't know where this came from and I don't know when the next one's coming, but it annoys my wife sometimes because she's like, where did you come up with this? I'm like, I just woke up. And then it was like the first thing that was in my head was all these things. And it's detailed, like super detailed, like not vague thoughts.
Right.
Like one by one, do these things and have them done by Monday. It's like my boss is there beside me or something telling me this is what needs to happen. And I'm just like, I don't understand that. I really don't. So interesting.
I have and I'm glad you follow up on it, because not everybody does. And sometimes the timing it's like because a couple of years ago, I told my husband, it's like, okay, this is a thought I've had that I think is going to happen. Okay, it hasn't happened yet, but that doesn't mean it wasn't supposed to, or maybe the timelines have changed and, maybe circumstances have changed, so I just kind of have to go with the flow. But a really sweet example recently is my daughter wanted to move out of a house she was living in, but she needed to stay in we live in the same neighborhood, and she wanted to stay in this neighborhood to keep her girls in their same schools. in the school district. But it needed to have enough room for everybody. It needed to be, it's close to her office, and it needed to be in the school. She had requirements.
Yep.
And her girls were adamant on not having to share a room. I'm going, well, I don't know if you're going to find a 3-bedroom around here that you can afford, because rents in this part of Portland are, jacking up. And and she had found one that was a 2-bedroom, but it had like this huge dining room that they wouldn't have needed to use as a dining room. I go, well, so with some partitions, you could kind of make this the 3rd bedroom. And so she applied for it. And then I was walking by this other, like, I guess they're condos, but apartments, condos, whatever, this complex that often has a for rent sign. And usually it seems like the rent is way too high. And so I just was walking by one day and I said, oh, 3-bedroom. And I kept walking. No, she's already found the other place. She's set for that. Then I better go. Let me just turn around, go take a picture of that, because it had 3 bedrooms. It has a storage area. It's got pretty much everything she wanted that was on her bucket list for an apartment, separate bedrooms. It has 1.5 bath, and it's got all the things she wanted. And the price point was, doable. And she, that was inspiration, or that was intuition. And if I just kept walking, that opportunity would have passed her by, and they're moved in. They love it. The girls love it. And it's just 6 blocks the other way from, I used to go 6 blocks one way. Now I go 6 blocks that way. So we're still all together. The girls are still in the same school district. She can, she's still a few blocks from work. So it's perfect. And it's like, and my daughter recognizes these abilities I have. And she's so grateful that I listened to my intuition on that thing. So that seemed so simple. I go, I just better go take a picture. Here, call them.
Yeah. No, that's great.
Here's your 3-bedroom.
Exactly. It's amazing. Okay. So Joanne, we've covered many great things.
Yes.
One thing I like to do too is, because we are a podcast about authors, and we have authors who do listen to this. Some authors are brand new. They're just in the beginning process of writing a book. Some just have published. They're in different stages of the journey. Do you have any advice for someone who is contemplating writing a book?
I'd say write it. I mean, I had never thought of writing a book. Now, I know a lot of people have written a book during COVID that probably would have never, because they had time on their hands. And, and there's so much I didn't know on the whole process. So one thing I learned is, even if you're in just the writing process, you need to start promoting yourself. I didn't start promoting myself early enough. I waited till it was done, and then I started promoting I told people, but I've learned a lot of things like, oh, I should be doing this before I even publish the book. So there's lots of tips, and there's lots of people out there that can help you. But if you've got something inside you to, keep it, just know that it's usually doesn't happen overnight. Mine came together quicker than I thought, but a lot of people, it takes them a few years to write a book, or maybe longer than that, but some people can write it quickly. It just depends. But, if you've got a story in you, I don't feel like I'm going to be doing any creative fiction writing at all, but I have some ideas for other nonfiction things. That's just, I'm better suited for that. But if you've got some ideas and stories, just write them down, even if nobody sees them, even if you don't share them with anybody, but just write them down, because you'll feel better. And, that may develop into something, who knew I'd ever write a book? Certainly nobody in my family, certainly nobody. And
there you go.
You just never know. And there's a lot of writers groups out there, and there's a lot of ways to help. People can give you feedback. So there's a lot of support. There's a lot of supportive communities out there that can help. So, I'd say go for it.
Excellent. Yeah. So Joanne, what's the best way for somebody to reach out to you? Maybe they are hosting a conference and they need a great
that would be
speaker,
fun.
Or they would, right? Now that COVID's hopefully beyond us, so we can get back to a normal life. What's the best way for somebody to get in touch
my
with you? My
email is Joanne, Joann, at midlifemagic.biz. And I have the website dragonhillbooks.net, so you can get a hold of me that way too. My contact information is all over the place, and I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, all kinds of places, but that's my main email for that kind of stuff. And I am speaking in October in Dublin, California. So yeah, in person.
Well, that's great.
I know.
Wow.
So Yeah.
That's amazing. I'm very happy to hear that in-person events
Slowly
are coming
but
back.
surely.
That's wonderful.
Slowly but surely. Yes.
Excellent. So Midlife Magic.
Thank you
by
so
Joanne
much.
Richards. Nice to have you. I was so excited and anxiously optimistic and very excited and
good.
curious and everything all mixed into one big gigantic pot, and very excited that we could have a chance to talk today. So
I
hope
would
we can do
love
this
that. I
again
would love that.
sometime.
And if I could just, if I may, if people are interested in the
Sure.
space related military stuff that my husband's written, the website for that is edhq.org, for Earth Defense Headquarters .org. And everything's digital. You just click and pay and download. And there's a lot of reports on there. So
Sweet.
yeah, a lot of cool stuff. Yeah.
Interesting. There'll be some interesting people listening to this going,
So thank you. I've loved it.
Great.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome, Joanne. Thank you for being part of the podcast today. Everyone go take a look and give Joanne some support and love. Tell her you heard her podcast here on
Exactly. Thanks for,
and we're again.
Well, thanks for doing what you're doing, for supporting the authors.
It's fun. I love meeting authors. I love hearing the story behind the book. I love hearing the creative process. For me, it's like it's just a fun time.
Good.
I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Very good. Thank you so much, Joanne.
You're welcome.
Okay. Hi guys, this is Dave from Living the Next Chapter, a podcast designed to connect authors and audiences. We're always on the lookout for our next interview. If you're an author, a publisher, and you have a book, whether you're just starting, whether you're halfway through writing, or it's all done and you want to tell the world, that's why we're here at Living the Next Chapter. Get in touch with us through livingthenextchapter.com, contact us, and let's set up some time together to discuss your book, to discuss your project, and how we can get you on the show. My name is Dave, and I would love to speak to you. So go to livingthenextchapter.com, and let's get over there together and discuss all the great things that you're up to as an author, as a publisher, and let's grow your audience together. Join us on livingthenextchapter.com for great authors and an audience that's eager to hear about what you're up to as an author and a publisher. Contact us today and let's get your book out in front of others. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.